Observe a male bird singing a complex melody in the spring. Its throat physically vibrates as it executes a series of precise vocalizations. When we observe this, the most immediate question to ask is, why does this animal behave this way? In biology, that question is often an epistemological trap. Without structural parameters, asking why invites multiple, seemingly contradictory answers. An endocrinologist might say the bird sings because a sudden spike in hormones forced it to do so. An evolutionary ecologist might argue the bird sings to maximize its reproductive fitness. Both scientists are correct, yet they are describing different biological realities. Without a standardized method to organize these facts, researchers risk conflating immediate physiological triggers with deep evolutionary functions. This leads to the confusion of a behavior's mechanics with its purpose. In 1963, Nobel laureate ethologist Decoding Tinbergen established a framework to organize these different explanations. Tinbergen's foundational premise was to treat behavior as a measurable phenotypic trait. A phenotypic trait is any observable characteristic of an organism, such as its wing shape or eye color, resulting from the interaction of its genes and its environment. Under this framework, explaining any behavioral phenotype requires mapping it across 4 distinct complementary questions. These questions are organized across 2 primary axes, the level of explanation and the time frame of the action. Applying this matrix ensures that researchers separate the immediate operations of a biological machine from the reasons it was built in the first place. We establish the y-axis of this model to define the level of explanation. This separates proximate causes from ultimate causes. Proximate causes are the immediate physiological mechanics acting within a single organism's lifespan. Ultimate causes are the generational evolutionary forces that shaped the trait over deep time. The first quadrant is mechanism, or causation. This is a proximate explanation of how the behavior physically triggers in the present moment. In our bird case study, the environmental cue of increasing spring day length triggers a specific physiological response, a massive spike in testosterone. This hormone surge causes air to flow through the syrinx, the avian vocal organ, which physically generates the sound waves we hear. The mechanism quadrant explains the biological domino effect, but it cannot explain how the bird learned the melody. For that, we move to the second quadrant, ontogeny or development. Ontogeny is the study of how a behavior emerges, changes, and degrades over the lifetime of an individual. The bird is not born with its full adult song. It must acquire the specific regional dialect by listening to and mimicking its parents and neighbors. This learning is not a blank slate. The bird is restricted by an innate genetic template that only allows it to learn the song of its own species. This is an example of a gene-environment interaction, where inherited biology dictates the boundaries of what can be learned from the environment. Ontogeny shows that behavior is a dynamic, lifelong process, rather than a static snapshot. When we shift from proximate triggers to ultimate causes, we reach the third quadrant, function. Function evaluates the adaptive value of a behavior. It asks how the behavior contributes to survival and reproductive success. In the wild, the song functions as a powerful acoustic signal to repel rival males from a territory. Simultaneously, the complexity of the song acts as a signal of genetic quality to attract females. By securing territory and mates, the behavior directly increases the bird's reproductive fitness. The bird does not sing because it consciously understands these benefits. It sings because ancestors who sang out-reproduced those who remained silent. Function reveals the strategic utility of a behavior, but it does not explain where that strategy originated. The final quadrant is phylogeny. Phylogeny is the study of how a behavioral trait evolved across deep time and across multiple species branches. The complex melodies of modern birds did not appear spontaneously. They are evolutionary elaborations of simpler alarm calls used by distant ancestors. This illustrates evolutionary constraint. Current behaviors are limited by ancestral pathways. A bird can evolve acoustic signals because its ancestors developed lungs, but it cannot suddenly switch to communicating via light. Researchers map these trajectories by comparing the behaviors of related species to identify common ancestral roots. Phylogeny contextualizes behavior as an inherited and modified legacy rather than an isolated tool. When we view the full 2 by 2 matrix, we have 4 distinct answers to the question of why the bird sings. These quadrants are not competing theories. They are overlapping dimensions of a single biological reality. Studying a behavior's evolutionary function is incomplete without an understanding of the physiological mechanisms that physically constrain it. In behavioral ecology, the standard approach is summarized by one principle: mechanism and development serve function via evolution. Behavioral ecology relies on these 4 questions to bridge the gap between laboratory genetics and field observation. This framework applies far beyond simple avian vocalizations. It is used to decode complex systems like the cooperative hunting strategies of wild dogs or the policing behaviors in insect colonies. These principles extend to our own species. For example, researchers have used Tinbergen's matrix to study how modern interventions, like oral contraceptives, interact with biological mechanisms to influence human mate choice and relationship satisfaction. Today, modern technology allows us to track a single behavioral trait, from molecular genomics to global population dynamics. Whether the goal is to conserve biodiversity or decode the origins of sociality, separating mechanical causation from evolutionary purpose is a requirement for understanding the natural world.